We get a few of these a time. You feel like it's just obvious. This should just not be happening. In this case, female genital mutilation, FGM, and it falls into that category, doesn't it? It is a cultural, traditional practice that's gone on for possibly centuries. Now, we've put it on the grid today because it is International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation. And I'm going to bring in Sarah straight away now to explain and extrapolate on this for us, Sarah.
Well, female genital mutilation is also known as FGM, cutting, sunnah and khitan in some countries. And as Kamal says, it's done mainly for cultural reasons, but really what it comes down to is that a woman will mostly no longer be satisfied sexually. It's believed to reduce the chances of her bringing shame on the family by having sex, for example, outside of marriage. And 200 million girls living today in 30 countries have undergone this practice. And that's around, just to give you a bit of perspective here, that's around the size of the world's fifth largest population, Brazil, which stands at about 209 million at the moment. But FGM is mainly predominantly happening in Africa. You can see here, this is a map. It's showing you different countries, including Egypt, which is where I'm from. And it also happens in the Middle East as well as Asia. Again, not as much as Africa. That's despite it being illegal in most countries. But campaigners are slowly raising awareness and helping victims. And this is in Tanzania, for example. We actually covered it on AJE Plus only just a month ago about an online crowd mapping tool, which is helping young girls escape FGM and find safety. So this is also happening in Gambia, where many are campaigning to end FGM, which has been taking place for years, but the practice was actually made illegal in 2011, and men are also taking part. So it's not just women, and I spoke to a guy earlier called Mamadou, and he told me all about it.
In the Gambia, the advocacy on FGM has been going on for the past 30 years, using the media to amplify voices on FGM and also organizing radio talk shows in the rural areas, including the urban. In these radio shows, survivors, practitioners, health personnel, and religious leaders are all invited to come and discuss with the people on health implications and how FGM cannot be associated with both religion and culture. And today is 6th February 2017. We are observing the International Day of Zero Tolerance to FGM, and we have a lot of radio activities. And in the evening, we will be having intergenerational dialogue, that is bringing in the old and the young to see that the gap is bridged on FGM between the young and the older generation.
Well, it's important to also notice that it's not just happening in Africa, Middle East and Asia, because it's also happening in developed countries. For example, the UK, which is also where I'm from. And just a few hours ago, the UK government launched an anti-FGM campaign called the Red Triangle Initiative, because according to the latest figures, FGM is discovered or treated there every single hour. And we found this app, which actually is not there, but there's an app that was developed by Coventry University, and the idea is that it aims to arm girls with information, especially those that are high risk, and it's also taken privacy issues into consideration because many women fear that they might get caught with the app or any information that they're arming themselves with. But we want to know what you think. What should be done to end this illegal practice of FGM? So we want to hear from you. Tweet us using the hashtag AJE Newsgrid, and you can get in touch with me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Sarah Khairat.
Thank you, Sarah. Starting to get some questions in, actually, and a good time to put them to Leila Hussein, who's an FGM survivor herself. She works as a psychotherapist and a campaigner on this issue. She has a charity called the Dahlia Project, which protects girls from FGM. Leila, thank you so much for your time. Tell me about how difficult it is to fight the mindset on this. I've just had a comment through on Twitter from Andrew who said the ideology surrounding FGM needs to be fought with education, and that's already difficult to apply to a lot of rural areas in Africa, for example. How difficult do you find this battle?
I mean, as you said, it is quite difficult, but I think the only way we're going to make any changes, first of all, we need to change the language that we use when we talk about FGM. I think a couple of times, even on your segment, you use culture and tradition and religion. We need to recognise FGM is actually one of the worst forms of violence that women and a girl will ever undergo. But also, this is about patriarchal system. So in order for us to tackle it, we need to use the correct language, and then we can actually implement the appropriate work. And this is about the control of women's bodies and sexuality,
Can you tell me more about, sorry to interrupt you, can you tell me more about that language? I find that quite interesting, the terminology. What, if you were helping me write this segment earlier today, what do you think we should have been saying? Put it that way.
I would never have used the word religion or culture, because then that kind of minimizes what's actually, for me, culture and religion, it's happy things, you know, food, drink, dancing. But when we are talking about violence, we actually need to use the word violence. And FGM is a form of child abuse, and touching children's genitals is a form of sexual abuse. So by using those words, we have no way of actually walking away from this issue. And I think that's what's happened over the past couple of decades when we are talking about this subject. I don't think we took it very seriously. So I think the moment we actually start to take it seriously, we might actually implement the appropriate work. And in this country, you know, for me, actually, I don't think it's difficult to tackle FGM. We just need to use the appropriate acts that we already have in place. We need to, for example, in the UK, we are still struggling to teach children about sex and healthy relationships. FGM and all forms of violence against women and children should be implemented into our school curriculum in order to make any changes. Because if I use myself as an example, I grew up in the West most of my life, and I thought there was nothing wrong with FGM. So I need spaces, safe spaces, and this is what we do at the Dahlia Project. We create these spaces for women and girls in counselling services where they can actually recognise this as a form of abuse. Because the moment you recognise it's an abuse, then you can actually do something about it.
To that end, how forthcoming are women? You know, Sarah was just talking about how there's an app there which women might want to use because it helps them with some anonymity, and then they won't get caught talking about it. How forthcoming have you found women to be with your charity and your work?
From my experience, I mean, obviously, I work with women who don't even have access to such things and apps and telephones. We want to create safe spaces within our GPs, our school. We need to create spaces within our midwifery departments, because, you know, a lot of these women are pregnant and giving birth. So that's where we need to start creating safe spaces for the women to speak about. Unfortunately, today I came back from a protest where they're closing down one of our best clinics in Acton. So for me, that's really my biggest concern today, because you know, the physical effects of FGM and the psychological impact is something you have to live with for the rest of your life. And we need to make sure, in order to tackle it appropriately, we need to make sure we have accessible services. And it's really sad, on a day like today, we had to go and protest against such closure of such clinics.
Layla Hussein, so interesting talking to you on this subject. I thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.